He thought it was just an ordinary USB drive. A USB I'd carelessly left on the conference table. A USB he believed would give him what he needed to take my position. But I'm never careless. I've never been careless. He took the bait I'd carefully placed, and what was inside wasn't documents, but his fate. The moment his fingers closed around that small piece of plastic, he'd already lost. He just didn't know it yet. My name is Natalie Greer, and I've learned that trust in corporate America is a luxury you can't afford. At 35, I've carved out my place as a data security specialist at Halveron Dynamics, a tech consulting firm nestled in the shadow of the Colorado Rockies. From the outside, our glass tower in downtown Denver gleams with promise, innovation, collaboration, success. Inside, it's a different story. The air tastes metallic with ambition, and every smile hides a calculation. I've been here 3 years now, long enough to map the invisible hierarchies and unspoken rules, long enough to know that competence isn't enough. You need to be a predator or prey. And I'd already been prey once before. 5 years ago, at my previous company, I was accused of a data breach I didn't commit. The real culprit had covered their tracks well, and I became the convenient scapegoat. 6 months of legal battles drained my savings, and though I was eventually cleared, the damage was done. My reputation was a ghost of what it had been. Halveron gave me a second chance, but I came here with new eyes. I watch everything, document everything, trust no one, especially not Darren Wells. Darren occupies the office 2 doors down from mine, his nameplate polished daily by his own hand. At 38, he's mastered the art of corporate camouflage, warm handshakes, concerned nods, perfectly timed jokes in meetings. To management, he's the ideal team player. To those of us in the trenches, he's something else entirely. I first noticed his pattern 6 months after I started. A junior developer named Sarah had an innovative approach to encryption that could have revolutionized our client protocols. She made the mistake of discussing it with Darren over coffee. 2 weeks later, Darren presented his breakthrough to the board. Sarah's protests fell on deaf ears. She had no proof, and Darren had already submitted the preliminary documentation under his name. Sarah left the company within a month. Before she cleared out her desk, she stopped by my office. "Watch out for him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's always listening." Since then, I've cataloged Darren's moves like a naturalist studying a venomous snake. The way he lingers by the printer when sensitive documents are being collected. How he volunteers to help with projects just before major presentations. The calculated timing of his sick days, always right after someone else has done the heavy lifting, returning just in time to share the credit. But it wasn't until last month that I realized I'd become his next target. It started small. Questions about my security protocols that seemed innocent enough. Offers to collaborate on the Morrison Industries project, our biggest contract this year. Then I noticed my Access logs showing unusual patterns. Someone had been attempting to breach my work directories using sophisticated masking techniques. Not sophisticated enough, though. Not for someone who'd spent 5 years paranoid about digital footprints. The conference room still smelled of burnt coffee and marker fumes from our 3-hour strategy session. As the team filtered out, discussing dinner plans and complaining about the Denver traffic, I made a show of gathering my papers hastily. "Damn," I muttered, loud enough for Darren to hear as he packed his leather portfolio with deliberate care. "Everything all right?" His concern was painted on thick, like too much cologne. "Just running late. My sister's in town." I shuffled my documents into my bag, letting a few papers flutter to the floor. As I bent to collect them, I placed the USB drive on the table, just slightly hidden under the edge of my legal pad. "You sure you got everything?" Darren asked, his eyes already scanning the table. "Think so." I slung my bag over my shoulder, making sure to look harried. "Have a good evening, Darren." I left without looking back, but I didn't need to. The micro camera I'd installed in my pen, a gift to myself after the Sarah incident, would tell me everything I needed to know. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed with the notification, Motion detected. I sat in the driver's seat, watching the feed on my phone as Darren circled back to the conference room. He glanced around, checking the hallway through the glass walls. Then, with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before, he palmed the USB and slipped it into his pocket. I allowed myself a small smile as I started the engine. The USB wasn't just bait. It was a carefully crafted weapon. Months of preparation had gone into this moment. Every line of code, every false document, every tracking protocol had been tested and retested. Darren Wells thought he was stealing my work. In reality, he was stealing his own destruction. The Colorado mountains loomed in my rearview mirror as I drove home, their peaks catching the last rays of sunlight, immovable, unforgiving, just like me. The next morning, I arrived at the office 15 minutes early. As always, the USB was gone. I'd confirmed that the night before through our security footage, which I'd accessed using my administrative privileges. Perfectly legal, of course. Security specialists need to review footage regularly. I settled into my morning routine: black coffee, system checks, email triage. But beneath the normalcy, I was watching. The tracking software I'd embedded in the USB had already started transmitting. Darren had plugged it into his home computer at 9:47 p.m. Greedy bastard couldn't even wait until morning. The beauty of my trap lay in its layers. The surface files were exactly what Darren expected: detailed analyses of our clients' vulnerabilities, breakthrough encryption protocols, even a revolutionary approach to quantum-resistant algorithms I'd been developing. All of it was real work, legitimate innovations that would make anyone's career. But each file was laced with invisible code, dormant until activated. By 10 a.m., Darren strutted past my office with an extra spring in his step. Through my glass wall, I watched him chat with Linda from HR, his laugh a bit too loud, his gestures a bit too expansive. The high of a man who thinks he's won the lottery. I pulled up my tracking interface on my secure partition, a part of my system invisible to our IT department. The data flowed like water. Files accessed, 17 times spent reading, 3 hours, 26 minutes. Files copied to personal drive, all external shares, none yet. He was being careful, studying the material before making his move. Smart, but not smart enough. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister in Boston. "How's the weather out there?" It was our code. She wasn't really my sister. Maya was a white-hat hacker I'd met during my legal troubles 5 years ago. She'd helped me understand how digital forensics could be manipulated, how easy it was to plant evidence if you knew what you were doing. We'd stayed in touch, bound by mutual understanding of how cruel the tech world could be to women who didn't play by the rules. "Storm brewing," I replied. 3 dots appeared, then, "Need an umbrella?" "Already have one." The Nightmare Protocol was more than just tracking software. It was a digital virus designed to simulate the exact kind of catastrophic data breach that had once nearly destroyed me. But this time, I controlled every aspect. Every false trail led back to Darren. Every timestamp, every IP log, every cached credential. All of it painted a picture of a man systematically stealing company secrets. The genius was in the gradual escalation. Stage 1 was simple tracking. Stage 2, which would trigger automatically after 48 hours, would begin creating phantom access logs, showing Darren entering secure databases he'd never actually touched. Stage 3 would generate outbound data transfers to suspicious IP addresses. Stage 4. Well, Stage 4 was when the real nightmare began. But I was patient. This wasn't about quick revenge. This was about complete, irrefutable destruction. Around lunch, I passed Darren in the break room. He was making himself a sandwich, humming off-key. "Hey, Natalie," he said, too casually. "Great meeting yesterday. Really innovative stuff you presented." "Just doing my job." I reached for a yogurt from the fridge, noting how his eyes tracked my movements. "You know, I've been thinking about your encryption protocols. Fascinating approach to the quantum problem." He was fishing, trying to see if I'd noticed the missing USB yet. "Which part specifically?" I kept my voice neutral, Professional. He paused, sandwich halfway to his mouth. The layered authentication process. I smiled. There was no layered authentication process in what I'd presented yesterday, but there was one in the USB files. Oh, that. Yeah, still working out some bugs. Probably won't be ready for months. Relief flickered across his face. Well, if you ever need a second pair of eyes, I'll let you know. Back in my office, I watched the tracking data spike. He was accessing the files again, probably cross-referencing with what I'd just said. Each access added another breadcrumb to the trail I was building. Maya sent another text. Weather report shows increasing pressure. She was monitoring from her end, watching as the USB's hidden protocols began reaching out to predetermined servers, establishing connections that would look, to any investigator, like deliberate communication with data brokers. 5 years ago, I'd been helpless as my career burned around me. I'd trusted the system, believed that innocence was enough. I'd learned the hard way that in corporate America, innocence is just another word for naive. This time was different. This time, I wasn't the victim. As the afternoon wore on, I documented everything with obsessive precision. Screenshots of the tracking data, time-stamped logs of Darren's behavior, even a psychological profile I'd been building for months. When the investigators came, and they would come, I'd be the helpful colleague, shocked at the betrayal, but eager to assist. The USB wasn't just a trap. It was a mirror, reflecting back every dirty trick that had ever been played on me, concentrated into a single, perfect weapon. Darren had no idea that he'd already signed his confession. He just hadn't finished writing it yet. Thursday arrived with Denver's typical spring volatility, sunshine one moment, threatening clouds the next. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., and the executive conference room hummed with nervous energy. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a sharp charcoal suit that said competent but not trying too hard. Darren, on the other hand, had gone full peacock, new tie, fresh haircut, and shoes that probably cost more than most people's rent. The Morrison Industries project was our main agenda item. I'd been leading it for 6 months, navigating their complex infrastructure, identifying vulnerabilities that could cost them millions if exploited. It was the kind of work that required not just technical skill, but intuition, understanding how hackers think because you've trained yourself to think like one. At 1:55, I took my seat at the conference table. Darren sat directly across from me, his leather portfolio placed just so, his Mont Blanc pen aligned perfectly parallel to its edge. Before we begin, Richard Halverson, our CEO, said as he entered the room, I want to commend the exceptional work being done on the Morrison account. Their CTO called me personally yesterday. They're impressed? I nodded acknowledgement, about to respond when Darren leaned forward. Actually, Richard, I've been analyzing some additional aspects of their security architecture. I think I've identified some opportunities we haven't explored yet. My blood didn't boil. It crystallized, cold and sharp. Oh? Richard's eyebrows rose with interest. Darren opened his portfolio and pulled out a presentation I recognized. My work, reformatted with his name on the cover sheet. But he'd been sloppy in his theft. The quantum encryption protocols he was describing contained the subtle poison pills I'd embedded, theoretical vulnerabilities that sounded sophisticated but would actually create gaps in any system foolish enough to implement them. The quantum-resistant algorithm Natalie mentioned could be enhanced, he said, his confidence growing with each slide. I've developed a modification that increases efficiency by 30%. I watched, fascinated despite myself. He was presenting my false data as gospel, too arrogant to realize he was building his own gallows. Interesting approach, I said when he paused for breath. Though I'm curious about the authentication sequence you're proposing. Wouldn't that create a potential backdoor through the third layer? His smile flickered. Well, obviously there would need to be additional safeguards, which would negate the efficiency gain. I kept my voice professionally curious. Unless you're suggesting we compromise security for speed? Of course not. I just think... Perhaps... Richard interrupted. You two could collaborate on refining this approach? Darren's jaw tightened. Actually, I've already begun implementation tests. Now, this was the moment. Implementation? I let concern creep into my voice. On whose authority? The Morrison protocols require documented approval for any testing phase. Preliminary tests. He backpedaled. Simulations. On which systems? I pulled out my tablet, fingers flying across the screen. I'm not seeing any logged test environments assigned to you. Where exactly have you been running these simulations? The room's atmosphere shifted. Richard's expression morphed from interest to concern. Other board members exchanged glances. I've been using isolated environments. Off-network. Off-network. I repeated the words like I was tasting something sour. You've been testing client security protocols on non-company systems. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. By admitting to off-network testing, Darren had just confessed to a serious breach of protocol. But denying it would mean admitting he'd lied about the implementation tests. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Darren said, his peacock feathers wilting. I hope so. Richard's voice had dropped to Arctic temperatures. Because taking proprietary client data off our secure network would be grounds for immediate termination and possible legal action. I tapped my tablet again. I can pull up the access logs if that would help clarify things. That won't be necessary, Darren said quickly. Too quickly. Actually, Richard said, I think it would be helpful. Natalie, please work with IT to review all access patterns for the Morrison files. I want a report by Monday. Of course. As the meeting continued, Darren contributed nothing more. He sat frozen, perhaps finally beginning to understand that something was very wrong. His stolen treasure was turning to ash in his hands. After the meeting, I lingered, organizing my papers as others filed out. Darren remained seated, staring at his portfolio. Darren, I said softly. He looked up, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear in his eyes. A word of advice? I moved closer, my voice barely a whisper. Next time you want to steal something, make sure you understand what you're stealing. His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't, I smiled, the expression sharp as winter ice. But you will. Oh, you will. I left him there, sitting alone in the executive conference room with his fraudulent presentation and his growing dread. The nightmare protocol had entered stage 2 that morning. By now, phantom access logs were being generated, each one showing Darren accessing increasingly sensitive databases. The best part? He'd try to cover his tracks, to delete the evidence of his theft, but every action he took would only dig him deeper. The USB's code was designed to spread with his panic, creating new evidence with every attempted deletion. Maya texted as I reached my office. Storm system intensifying. Category 3. I typed back, let it rain. Through my office window, I watched actual storm clouds gathering over the mountains. Nature's fury was random, chaotic, without purpose. My fury was none of those things. Friday morning arrived with an electric tension that had nothing to do with the weather. The nightmare protocol had been running for 62 hours, and the digital web I'd woven was beginning to vibrate with Darren's increasingly frantic movements. I sat at my desk, monitoring the cascade of events through my secure partition. The beauty of the protocol lay in its biomimetic design. It learned from Darren's behavior, adapting and evolving like a digital parasite. Every time he accessed his computer, every search query, every deleted file, it all fed the beast. At 9:17 a.m., the first domino fell. Natalie! Marcus from IT stood at my door, his usually cheerful face creased with concern. We've detected some anomalous activity on the network. Richard asked me to loop you in since it might be security-related. I followed him to the IT department, my expression carefully neutral. Inside, 3 technicians huddled around a bank of monitors, their screens alive with scrolling logs and alert notifications. What are we looking at? I asked. though I knew exactly what they'd found. Unauthorized data transfers, Marcus said, pulling up a visualization. Multiple large files being uploaded to external servers started around 2 a.m. The servers in question were honeypots, fake destinations I'd programmed into the protocol. To any investigator, they'd appear to be data broker sites based in Eastern Europe, the kind that paid top dollar for corporate secrets. Can you trace the source? I leaned in, playing my role, working on it. The transfers are using sophisticated masking techniques, bouncing through multiple VPNs. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. But there's something weird. The originating IP, it's residential, not from our network. Someone's working from home? Looks like it. He pulled up a geolocation map. Westminster area. I knew that address. Darren lived in Westminster. We need to inform Richard immediately, I said. This could be industrial espionage. As we walked to the executive floor, my phone buzzed. Maya. Subject attempting countermeasures, unsuccessful, protocol adapting. Darren was trying to clean his system, probably running every malware scanner he could find. But the protocol wasn't malware in any traditional sense. It was a ghost in his machine, rewriting reality at the binary level. Richard's office was a monument to corporate success. Floor-to-ceiling windows, golf trophies, pictures with politicians. He listened to Marcus's report with growing alarm, his jaw tightening with each revelation. How much data are we talking about? Richard asked. At least 400 gigabytes so far. Marcus replied, all high-value files, client lists, proprietary algorithms, financial projections. Richard's face darkened. Who has access to all of these systems? That's the thing, Marcus said. Individually, lots of people have partial access. But to get all of this, you'd need either admin privileges or, he hesitated, or, Richard prompted, or you'd need to be systematically stealing credentials over time, building a collection of access keys. Exactly what the protocol was simulating. Digital breadcrumbs leading back months, showing a pattern of careful, deliberate theft. I want a list of everyone with access to these systems, Richard ordered, and I want our legal team on standby. If someone's selling our data. His phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. FBI, what the hell? I watched him pale as he listened to the voice on the other end. The protocol had entered stage 4 ahead of schedule. The phantom data transfers had triggered automated alerts at the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center. When corporate espionage crossed certain thresholds, federal agencies took notice. Yes, we'll cooperate fully, Richard said. Yes, I understand. This afternoon. Of course. He hung up and looked at us with shell-shocked eyes. The FBI's cyber division wants to send a team. They've detected what they're calling a significant corporate data breach with national security implications. National security. Some of Morrison Industries' contracts were with defense contractors. I'd made sure the protocol included those files in its phantom transfers. Nothing actually compromised, but the appearance was damning. Sir, I said quietly, I think I should start that access review immediately. The FBI will want to see our internal investigation. Do it, Marcus. I want you to lock down everything. No one accesses sensitive files without my personal authorization. As I returned to my office, I passed Darren's door. He was inside, visible through the glass, hunched over his laptop. Sweat stained his expensive shirt. His fingers trembled as he typed. I knocked gently. He jerked like he'd been electrocuted. You okay? I asked, stepping inside. You look terrible. Fine, he croaked. Just stomach bug. His laptop screen was angled away, but I could see the reflection in his window. System restore. File shredder. VPN client. The digital equivalent of a criminal trying to burn evidence while the building was already surrounded. You should go home, I suggested. Rest up. Can't. Too much work. His laugh was brittle. Big presentation went well yesterday, right? Richard seemed concerned about some of your claims. Concerned? His voice pitched higher. The off-network testing. Legal's probably going to want documentation. I shrugged. You know how they are. Cross every T, dot every I. His face had gone gray. Legal. Standard procedure. I wouldn't worry about it. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, it mentioned some network anomalies. They're doing a full security audit. Might want to make sure your home system is clean. You know how paranoid they get about work-from-home setups. The noise he made wasn't quite a word, more like the sound of a man drowning in his own mistakes. I returned to my office and pulled up the protocol's status. Stage 5 would initiate in 6 hours, the final revelation. Every piece of stolen data would be traced back to Darren's home IP, his personal devices, his digital fingerprints all over the crime scene. But the true artistry was in the details. The protocol had created a financial trail too. Small deposits in cryptocurrency wallets linked to Darren's identity. Browser histories showing research on untraceable payment methods. Even a draft email to his wife about coming into some money soon. None of it was real. But in the digital age, what was reality except ones and zeros arranged in convincing patterns? The storm that had been building finally broke, rain lashing against the windows. In the reflection, I could see Darren's office. He was standing now, pacing, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling a lawyer. Too late. The nightmare protocol was living up to its name. And we were only just beginning. The weekend passed in a blur of FBI interviews and emergency meetings. I played my part perfectly, the concerned colleague, shocked by the unfolding scandal but eager to help. By Monday morning, Halveron Dynamics felt like a crime scene. Federal agents had set up a command center in our largest conference room. They moved through the office with practiced efficiency, imaging hard drives, interviewing employees, constructing their case with methodical precision. I was in the break room, calmly making tea. When Darren stumbled in, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His designer stubble had grown into an unkempt beard, his eyes bloodshot and wild. Natalie. His voice was raw. I need to talk to you. Of course. I stirred honey into my tea with deliberate slowness. What's on your mind? Did you? He glanced around, checking for eavesdroppers. Did you do something to me? I raised an eyebrow. Do something? Darren, you're not making sense. The FBI showed me logs. Data transfers from my home computer. Cryptocurrency wallets in my name. But I never. He gripped the counter, knuckles white. It's impossible. Maybe your system was compromised, I suggested, voice full of concern. Hackers are sophisticated these days. No. The word exploded from him. It started after He caught himself, jaw snapping shut. After you what? His eyes darted between my face and the door. The war inside him was visible, confession battling self-preservation. Mr. Wells? Agent Sarah Chen stood in the doorway, her expression professionally neutral. We need you to come with us. Darren's face crumpled. I need more time. I can explain. Now, Mr. Wells. As they led him away, he looked back at me one last time. In his eyes, I saw the moment of full realization. He knew. But knowing and proving were two very different things. An hour later, the office was buzzing with rumors. Marcus stopped by my office, his face grim. They found everything, he said, closing my door behind him. Darren's been siphoning data for months. They traced cryptocurrency payments totaling over $2 million. $2 million. The protocol had been generous with its fictional bribes. That's incredible. I shook my head in apparent disbelief. He always seemed so professional. The FBI says it's one of the most sophisticated corporate espionage cases they've seen. He used advanced encryption, bounced signals through dozens of proxies, even created fake employee credentials. Marcus paused. The weird thing is, some of the techniques, they're beyond what I thought Darren capable of. Desperate people learn quickly, I offered. Maybe. But Marcus looked troubled. Natalie, they want to interview you again. Apparently, Darren's been claiming you set him up. Set him up? I laughed, the sound perfectly calibrated between amusement and offense. How would I even do that? Frame someone for months of systematic theft? Create fake cryptocurrency accounts? That's paranoid, even for Darren. That's what I told them, but they have to follow up on everything. The second FBI interview was more intense than the first. Agent Chen and her partner, an older man named Rodriguez, walked me through timeline after timeline. Where was I when the transfers occurred? Did I have access to Darren's systems? Had I noticed any unusual behavior? I gave them everything, documented concerns about Darren's interest in my projects, the Morrison meeting where he'd presented stolen ideas, even my suspicion that he'd been accessing my files. All true, all verifiable, all painting me as another potential victim who'd narrowly escaped his scheme. Ms. Greer, Agent Rodriguez said finally. Mr. Wells claims you gave him a USB drive containing the stolen data. A USB drive? I frowned thoughtfully. I did lose one recently. About a week ago, but it only had my personal research on quantum encryption, nothing classified. Would you be willing to provide us with a copy of what was on it? Of course. I pulled out my laptop, navigating to a carefully prepared folder. Here's everything. Though I should mention, some of these protocols are theoretical. Implementing them incorrectly could actually create vulnerabilities. Agent Chen's eyes sharpened. What kind of vulnerabilities? The kind that might look like backdoors to someone who didn't fully understand the mathematics. It's why I was still testing. I stopped, eyes widening in feigned realization. Oh my God. The presentation Darren gave. He was describing my theoretical work as if it were ready for implementation. The agents exchanged glances, another piece clicking into place in their puzzle. By the end of the day, news of Darren's arrest had spread through the tech community. The charges were staggering: corporate espionage, wire fraud, violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, conspiracy to commit economic espionage. His bail was set at $5 million. I stayed late, ostensibly working on the security review Richard had requested. In reality, I was watching the protocol's final acts. Like a digital Ouroboros, it was consuming itself, erasing traces of its existence while leaving Darren's crimes intact. Maya messaged, "Cleanup complete, no traces, forecast clear." I deleted the message and leaned back in my chair. Through my window, Denver's lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Somewhere in the federal detention center, Darren was probably still trying to understand how his perfect plan had gone so wrong. He'd never figure it out. The protocol was designed by someone who'd spent 5 years studying how innocent people could be framed. I'd simply reversed the process, using those same techniques to ensure the guilty couldn't escape. My desk phone rang. Richard. Natalie, I wanted to thank you for your cooperation with the investigation, and to inform you that the board met in emergency session. We're promoting you to Chief Security Officer, effective immediately. Sir, I don't know what to say. You've proven yourself, not just technically, but ethically. In these dark times, we need people we can trust absolutely. Trust? Such a fragile thing. After hanging up, I opened my drawer and looked at the identical USB drive nestled there, the real one, containing my actual work. Clean, brilliant, revolutionary. Ready to change the world of encryption. Darren had stolen poison thinking it was treasure. The oldest trick in the book, dressed in modern clothes. I picked up the USB, weighing it in my palm. Such a small thing to destroy a man's life. But then again, Darren had taught me that small things could have devastating consequences. I was simply his best student, the one he never knew he had. The executive boardroom had never felt colder. 2 weeks after Darren's arrest, we gathered for an emergency all-hands meeting. Richard stood at the head of the table, his usual commanding presence somehow diminished. The FBI investigation had shaken everyone. I want to address the elephant in the room. Richard began. What happened with Darren Wells has damaged our reputation. Clients are asking questions. Some are considering terminating contracts. Around the table, faces were grim. Stock prices had dropped 12%. Morrison Industries was demanding a full security audit by an independent firm. The very survival of Halveron Dynamics hung in the balance. However, Richard continued, we've also shown that we can detect and stop insider threats. Our new chief security officer, he nodded toward me, has implemented protocols that go beyond industry standards. We're not just recovering, we're becoming stronger. After the meeting, I stood in my new corner office, looking out at the Denver skyline. The promotion came with a view, a secretary, and a salary that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. Everything I'd thought I wanted. So why did victory taste like ash? A knock interrupted my thoughts. Linda from HR entered, followed by a woman I didn't recognize, mid-20s, sharp eyes, nervous energy. Natalie, this is Sarah Martinez. She's here about the junior developer position. Sarah? I studied her face and saw my younger self, ambitious, talented, unaware of how cruel this world could be. Ms. Martinez has excellent credentials, Linda continued. But given recent events, we wanted your security assessment. After Linda left, I interviewed Sarah with unusual thoroughness. She was brilliant, innovative, hungry for success, exactly the kind of person Darren would have targeted. Can I ask you something off the record? Sarah said as the interview concluded. Everyone's talking about what happened, how someone like Darren Wells could fool everyone for so long. He didn't fool everyone, I said carefully. He just counted on people being too afraid or too polite to act on their suspicions. But you weren't afraid. I considered my response. I've learned that sometimes the system doesn't protect the innocent. Sometimes you have to protect yourself. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Darren's wife, Patricia, stood in my office doorway. Designer clothes couldn't hide her exhaustion, the way her shoulders curved inward like she was protecting herself from invisible blows. Mrs. Wells, I said, rising. I'm not sure this is appropriate. Please. Her voice was barely a whisper. I need to know. Did my husband really do those things? I gestured to a chair. She sat on the edge, clutching her purse like a lifeline. The evidence is overwhelming, I said. He swears he was framed. He says you... She stopped, shaking her head. I'm sorry. I know how that sounds. Conspiracy theories. Denial. It's natural to want to believe in someone you love. Did you know? She looked up, eyes swimming with tears. That morning at the coffee shop, when you warned me about trusting too easily, were you trying to tell me about Darren? I remembered that chance encounter 6 months ago. Patricia excited about her husband's promotion prospects. Me making small talk about the corporate world. I'd known even then what Darren was. I was speaking generally, I said. I had no idea he was capable of this. She studied my face, searching for something, truth, comfort, absolution. Finally, she stood. They froze our accounts, seized our assets. FBI says it's all proceeds of crime. Her laugh was bitter. 20 years of marriage, and I never really knew him at all. After she left, I sat in the gathering dusk, reflecting on collateral damage. Patricia hadn't stolen anything. Neither had Darren's teenage children, who were now pariahs at their private school. The protocol had been precise in destroying Darren, but destruction was never surgical. My secure phone buzzed. Maya. You see the news? She asked without preamble. I pulled up my newsfeed. The headline made my blood freeze. Alleged corporate spy found dead in federal custody. Suicide? I managed. That's the official story. Happened an hour ago. Bed sheet, camera malfunction. My hands were steady, but something inside me shifted. Death hadn't been part of the plan. You there? Maya asked. Yeah. Listen, this isn't on you. Whatever happened in that cell, that was his choice. Or maybe what? Maybe he pissed off the wrong people. 2 million in fake transfers? That kind of accusation makes enemies, the kind who have reach inside federal facilities. After hanging up, I walked to the window. The mountains were invisible in the darkness, but I knew they were there, immovable, eternal, indifferent to human schemes. I'd wanted Darren destroyed. I'd wanted him to suffer as I had suffered, to lose everything as I had nearly lost everything. But I'd wanted him alive to experience it. The USB drive still sat in my drawer. I took it out, turning it over in my hands. Such a small thing. A few gigabytes of carefully crafted code that had started an avalanche. I thought about Sarah Martinez, eager and vulnerable, about Patricia Wells, widow to a man who might have been a thief or might have been a victim, about Darren himself, whatever his faults, now reduced to a headline and a statistic. I don't like being stolen from, I said to the empty office, especially by the stupid. But Darren hadn't been stupid. He'd been arrogant, greedy, careless, but not stupid. And now he was dead. I locked the USB in my private safe, next to the real one with my legitimate work. Tomorrow, I'd mentor Sarah Martinez, teach her to navigate corporate sharks. I'd implement new security protocols that would protect the innocent along with company assets. I'd be the guardian I'd wished for 5 years ago. But tonight, I stood in my corner office, chief security officer of a wounded company, and wondered if justice and revenge were really the same thing, or if I'd become the very monster I'd set out to destroy. 6 months later, I stood in the same spot where this all began, Conference Room C, now renovated and bearing no trace of its history. The worn carpet had been replaced, the walls repainted, even the table was new. As if the company could erase the past with fresh furniture. But I remembered, I would always remember. Halveron Dynamics had survived. Stock prices recovered. New clients replaced the ones we'd lost. Sarah Martinez was thriving under my mentorship, her brilliant mind protected by the protocols I'd put in place. The company newsletter called it Rising from the Ashes. Such poetic language for such an ugly process. I'd been named one of Denver's top 40 under 40 executives. The award sat on my shelf, catching the morning light. Recognition for my leadership during crisis, for my integrity, for my dedication to justice. The word tasted bitter now. Patricia Wells had moved back to Ohio with her children. The last I heard, she was working as a bookkeeper, rebuilding a life from scratch. Sometimes I'd catch myself composing emails to her, apologies, explanations, justifications, but I never sent them. What could I say? That her husband was a thief who got caught? That he was innocent but perfectly framed? Either truth was cruel. Ms. Greer. Sarah knocked on my door. The Peterson Industries team is here for the security presentation. I'll be right there. She hesitated. Are you okay? You seem distant lately. Just thinking about the past. You know, the Darren Wells thing? She lowered her voice. I heard he had a heart condition nobody knew about, that the stress of prison. Another fiction. The autopsy had been inconclusive, the investigation perfunctory. A disgraced corporate spy dying in custody barely made the news cycle. But I'd done my own research. Darren had been healthy. Whatever happened in that cell, it wasn't natural causes. Ancient history, I told Sarah. Focus on the future. After she left, I opened my private safe. Both USB drives lay there, the poison and the antidote, the false and the true. I'd never used the real one. My revolutionary encryption protocols remained unshared, gathering digital dust. Somehow, using them felt like profiting from Darren's destruction. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The weather in Boston is lovely. Coffee sometime, Mies? Maya. Checking in, as she did every few months, making sure I was handling the aftermath. I deleted the message without responding. That connection was another thing that needed to stay buried. The mountains beyond my window stood unchanged, indifferent to human drama. I'd once thought they reflected my own implacability. Now I saw them differently. Not strong, but simply disconnected. Existing outside the messy realm of consequence and regret. A year ago, I'd been a victim plotting revenge. Now I was successful, promoted, secure, everything I'd thought I wanted. But late at night, when sleep wouldn't come, I'd find myself at my computer, searching for signs of the protocol, looking for traces of my digital weapon in other corporate scandals, other destroyed lives. So far, nothing. The protocol had died with Darren, but the knowledge of how to create it lived in my mind, a loaded gun I could never put down. He thought it was just an ordinary USB drive, I said to the empty office, repeating the words that had started this journey. He was wrong. But maybe I'd been wrong too. Maybe revenge wasn't justice. Maybe destroying a destroyer just created another monster. Maybe the real nightmare wasn't what I'd done to Darren, but what I'd done to myself. I locked the safe and prepared for my presentation. 40 slides on protecting corporate assets, preventing insider threats, maintaining ethical standards. I'd become an expert at saying all the right things. The USB drives would stay locked away. The protocol would remain a ghost in the machine of my memory. I'd mentor young talent, protect the innocent, serve my company with distinction. But I would never forget the weight of that small piece of plastic in my hand, the ease with which I'd crafted someone's doom, the cold satisfaction that had curdled into something harder to swallow. Darren Wells had stolen from me, and I'd made him pay the ultimate price. Whether he'd pulled that bedsheet tight himself or someone else had done it for him. His blood was on my hands either way. He didn't know it was a nightmare that would destroy him. I whispered to the mountains, to the ghosts, to myself. What I hadn't known was that nightmares, once unleashed, never really end. They just find new dreamers to haunt. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Where are you listening from? I'd love to know. Please share in the comments below so we can connect with listeners from around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Natalie's position? Was justice served, or did revenge go too far? Let me know your perspective in the comments.